Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Capitalist Corner. I am your host, Mark Pellegrino, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Liebowitz, who also happens to be the host of his own show, The Rational Egoist. I'm sure there's tons of interesting things going on there, right? In the last 24 hours?
Oh, I've actually released a great episode on purpose, the importance of purpose in life. The man I interviewed actually has somewhat different perspective on purpose. He uses it differently from what I would usually, how I usually would use it. But it stemmed from an article of his that I read where he used to be a hospice worker, and he talked about using the lens of the dying to shape our lives, because he's talking about what people ultimately regret at the end. And he told me that at the end of their lives, people don't usually regret what they haven't accomplished. They regret what they have not tried. So it's a very good interview. I enjoyed the discussion, and I think people will enjoy it as well.
You know, this was precisely the argument I used for this kid who wanted to come out to California to study acting and be an actor, but his parents wanted him to go to law school, and he went to college because they wanted him to go to college. He studied economics, got a degree in that, and I said, well, look, you have to understand that first of all, you have to know right off the bat you probably won't make it. So the art for its own sake has to be a joy to you, because you might not get material rumination for it. As long as you understand that, I want you to understand that the one thing you will regret on your deathbed is not having at least tried to be an actor. You may not regret failing, but you will regret having never tried. So I'm glad that I was on the same page with that guy. And maybe it was my own work.
Mark, it's interesting because his whole point, his I don't know if it's premise or conclusion in this case, but it doesn't matter. His premise, I guess, is that if you have as your purpose results, meaning I'm going to go and become a famous actor, you're bound to fail, because you're going to be doing things that make you miserable in order to try to achieve this goal. He said you need to make the process your purpose so that you're doing things that you actually enjoy doing. And I thought it was fantastic. And it's basically what you just said.
Something I tell my students all the time, folks. I would just want to put a little disclaimer here at the top. We are speaking on our own behalfs and not on behalf of the American Capitalist Party. We will try to make the distinctions more clear when we're actually talking about issues that matter, when we're talking from our own perspective and when we're talking for the Capitalist Party. But just make sure that just in general, just presume we're talking from our own opinions right now. So we have a very interesting tweet that came up here that you showed me from Chase Oliver that I have to agree with 1,000%. And given the fact that I was just in Tennessee literally last weekend, this felt very relevant to me. Tennessee bans renting to illegal immigrants. Now, of course, this is going to get the right populists angry at us. And there's a couple of articles here we're going to talk about immigration and its effects on society. And I'll ask everyone present who may be agreeing with Trump's perspective to open your mind and look at it from another perspective. There might be more to this issue than meets the eye. Now, Chase Oliver says this is a violation of property rights, this Tennessee law. Unlibertarian, plain and simple. It shouldn't be the government's business who I allow to rent my property so long as it is an exchange made with consent from both parties. I can't find anything wrong with that argument, to be honest with you. I think that's true. The government has no right to interfere in voluntary exchanges between other human beings. Do you agree with this?
Broadly, yes. I like Chase. I like him personally. I've met him. I've interviewed him. I've interacted with him. He's a very nice guy, and from all indications is a person of integrity. What I found interesting, and I'll get back to the main point, but what I find very interesting, disheartening, and disgusting rather, is the comments. If you go into the comments, people don't actually address his argument. A lot of people are just saying, yeah, you're gay because he's gay. And what the idiots don't understand is that to somebody that's not a bigot, calling them gay doesn't matter. Right? Like, They don't care. The guy's gay. He doesn't look at it like a weakness or a sickness or something. That's the bigot, right? When the bigot says that, that's his perspective.
That insult has been finding a lot of purchase, I think, with MAGA Republicans. Have you noticed that? They've reverted to that as a slur again. But I haven't seen that quite since the 80s, to be honest with you.
Yeah, what we've actually done in large part, and this is actually more what interested me about the tweet than the tweet, although the tweet I did find very interesting too, is I get being against woke and being against political correctness, not a fan myself, but we've really, with the sort of demise of that, seen the nasty folks come out, right? And they think that they're maybe being edgy, or you're just a bunch of scumbags, right? That's what you are. You're a scumbag. This guy's making an argument for individual rights, property rights, and you're just, oh, you're gay. So they're ridiculous. Now, as to his point, I suppose there's a hypothetical somebody can come up with where if I know somebody's a known fugitive, that's a murderer or something, and I rent to him nonetheless, that I shouldn't be allowed to do that. That's far more complex. In this case, it's simple. I should not be accountable to do the government's job for them when it comes to their unconstitutional immigration laws. Neither should you. This is in the overwhelming interest of the landlord. It's in the interest of the immigrant. If these people want to consent to a contract, it's not the government's damn business. But all these, small government people, they're really not small government people, right? They're small government people when it comes to the things that they happen to care about, like, for instance, taxes. They don't want to pay a lot of taxes, so taxes are horrible. But the same principle that leads to the government taxing you is that which leads to the government regulating how you use your property and whom you rent to. So, in short, that's my bloviated way of saying, yes, I by and large agree with Chase. Former libertarian candidate for president, by the way.
Yes, I do recall this. So Marvin, sensible centrist, says, this is one of the more sensible comments on the feed, by the way. He says it's not. Criminals shouldn't be running free, and people shouldn't be helping criminals. Now, in the broad sense that you were talking about, this is true. If you're like recently, the fugitives that got out of the Louisiana jail, there were 10 of them, and they had to be swept up, and a number of them were helped by people on the outside. We're talking about murderers. I mean, these were convicted murderers that were being assisted by friends and family on the outside. That's certainly something very different than harboring somebody who happens to come over into this country by different means than are legally allowable, which we consider to be unconstitutional, since we think that the free movement from a bad place to a better place is actually a right. Broadly saying all criminal activity, in other words, breaking all laws. Now, I'm not endorsing breaking of laws, folks, but under this metric, if you broke the fugitive slave law by harboring a slave, which you were obligated by law to return to the rightful quote unquote owner, you would be prosecuted as being a criminal, and you would have no right, according to Marvin, the sensible centrist, of appeal. So I think, of course, you're morally obligated to fight laws like these immigration laws that place burdens on the immigrant and on us now that we're forced also to support them. These are all laws that need to be fought by individualists everywhere.
Right. And, even in the case of fugitives from justice, as a landlord, it's not my damn job to do an investigation, right, about if this person's running from the law, if they're a convicted criminal, whatever. It's my job to understand if the person can pay the rent. That's it. So it has to be, if you're no, but
you know what? You may actually look into that stuff to make sure that
you can. It's your right to do. I would say that's fine, but I don't think it's your obligation to the government to do so. By the way, let me just say, I wore this. I didn't realize this sweatshirt was going to be conflicting with this background. So not only do I got the wrong building behind me, which I still haven't had time to fix, but the wrong building, I was willing to tolerate that it interferes with my sweatshirt because I thought it was Carpenter's Hall, a significant historical place. but it's nothing, and it's causing me to disappear. Oh, by the way, I got the other Mark Pellegrino doll yesterday.
Another Mark Pellegrino doll?
Yeah, the little what are they called? Popcorns or something? I don't know. Yeah. So the next show we do, I'll have them both here, right here on the desk to show them both to the audience.
You're going to start rumors.
Rumors? What?
Well, with the way I talk about us being partners and all, you're going to start rumors. If you have those things displayed, I'm telling you, you're going to start rumors.
So if I have Mark Pellegrino action figures, that somehow vindicates you're calling us partners?
Pellegrino.
How does that work? Where do you come up with this stuff?
We're going to be shipped by the fandom soon. Okay,
let's get off this. Funko Pops. Oh, thank you, Allie.
I said that. I said Funko Pops.
Nobody was paying attention. We're paying attention to the chat right now, and you're trying to insinuate that we're somehow a homosexual couple because I want to have Mark Pellegrino dolls.
I'm insinuating no such thing. I'm just pointing out a reality.
It sounded to me and a lot of other people like that might have been what you're doing. Can we just move on to the stories?
Ship bromances, and they will ship this one. Look, Reason Magazine just came out with an article. I think Michael should post this because it's pretty doggone good.
I think I already did.
Oh, good. The First Amendment protects CNN's reporting on ICE block in Iran. Apparently, now
I'll do it again.
Trump is demonstrating a tendency to do what he does in life, which is litigate everything. He just puts everyone through the litigation mill. And he is now, I think, his private attorney. Now, perhaps this just came to me. Perhaps he's doing this to enrich himself later on, since he got a $16 million settlement just recently from a network, a major network news organization. Maybe he's looking for these guys to settle. All of them will settle with him, and he will have his presidential library all paid for at the expense of the media that he is abusing on his own behalf. Now, I guess he got pretty upset that CNN reported on the existence of this ICE Block app. So this app exists it has about 20,000 subscribers, and it's sort of like Google Maps or Waze. It tells you, you know how Waze can tell you when there's police up ahead? I find that a very informative and awesome little bit of a characteristic of that app that I really appreciate, because I could be speeding along, and then when I know there's cops ahead, I slow back down to the speed limit, and sure enough, there's a cop. I avoid points on my driver's license. I avoid my insurance going up and paying stupid fines to the state of California that I shouldn't have to pay. I really appreciate that characteristic of the app. Well, they've done something similar now with this ICE block, and if ever one of these subscribers sees ICE in the neighborhood, they can now inform people where they are in the neighborhood, and immigrants can take action accordingly. So I guess Trump didn't like the fact that they reported on this. It is, in fact, news. They didn't give away any of the links, even though I don't think that they should be restrained from giving away the links to the app if they so chose. They simply reported on it as news, but he's suing them anyway because he thinks this is damaging to the Trump administration. He's also doing something similar with the reporting on Iran. And is he doing this with CNN as well? Because they leaked.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, because they leaked the initial reporting that there was limited damage, and that it was the attack wasn't as effective as he at first thought. And he is doing this under defamation law, which has an extremely high threshold of proof. Are you laughing at that, or are you laughing at something
No,
else?
I'm laughing at that. It's ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous, but you know what he's planning on doing. He's gonna pitch a high figure that, like he did with the other news agency, $20 billion, $25 billion, and they're gonna settle for some fraction of that. And that's gonna be donated to some cause of his, which seems to be the Trump presidential library. So anyway, this is a very frightening precedent that, one, the acting president of the United States is privately suing these folks and using his power of the presidency and his control over the FCC to leverage these organizations to print and or talk about news that only he and the administration agree with. Now, this is scary. This is super scary.
Extremely.
Let's talk about this. Why is it scary?
Okay. I'm going to tell you why in a second. But first, Gary Menard is in the audience, and he says the more we bicker, the more obvious it is that we are a thing. Now, Gary's mistaken assumption. While your observation might be true in Mark's mind, it has nothing to do with reality, Gary. But I want to just say this: Gary Menard has a Facebook group, Northeastern Objectivists, I think it's called. Gary, if you could just post it, what the name of your Facebook group is, in the comments, and maybe some people can check you out on Facebook. I actually just met Gary the other day in Boston after being Facebook friends with him for a while. But yeah, of course, this is scary. And part of the problem is they've already set up, right, in the information conservative ecosystem, they've set up a narrative that the media is evil. There's this deep state conspiracy. Everybody's out to get Trump. They've been breaking laws. They're just going hard at him. Now, I'm not saying there's no kernels of truth here, but the degree to which they think it's true is absurd. But if you really believe that CNN is the enemy of the people and they're out to get Trump and they're breaking laws to do it, then you're going to cheer this thing. Similarly, if I really believed, for instance, that January 6th, that the election was stolen, they were doctoring voting machines, I would have been pissed off and probably would have been at the Capitol. The thing was, I knew that was BS. But that's the type of thing that happens. And what Trump wants to do is, by silencing his opponents or what he views as his enemies, is create a larger sphere of information that is only favorable to him. So it's like a self-reinforcing mechanism where we've had that info system that allows him to get away with this. And now he wants to censor the so-called enemies, which will broaden his ability to do this. And it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that it's preferable that we have a guy who does things out in the open and transparently because he doesn't realize they're wrong, to let's say the Democrats who are going behind the scenes and controlling Facebook, social media posts through the government and by stealth censoring, as opposed to a guy like this who does it all out in the open where everyone can see? What do you think is worse? Is there a case?
I don't think one is worse than the other as far as intention. I do think, though, that what Northeastern Connecticut Objectivist is, Gary Menard's group on Facebook, I do think at this moment in time that what Trump is doing has greater consequences. The reason is because when the mainstream media was controlling the narrative, conservatives would push back and say, well, we don't trust them. So that was good. You had maybe one conservative talk show host, Rush Limbaugh, who would always push back on him. And that was a good thing. But you didn't have, one, the cult-like following that Trump has, or two, just the blatant misinformation, right? It's not just skewed reporting that's going on here. This is... Yes, Scott, people push back on Trump, not people in the echo chamber. That's what we're talking about. You can always count on Scott to come in and try to defend Trump no matter what. Trump was right. Remember when Trump said, and this is the fundamental to me problem with all of this, Mark. Do you remember when Trump said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and
yes,
they would stay loyal to him?
Yes.
That right there is the problem. There was a similar dynamic when Obama was in office, where Obama could do no wrong. And the media ran constant cover for Obama. Yes, Scott, we know that you can use the Trump lingo. You can parrot Trump's terms, lawfare. We got it. So that's, to me, is very scary, right? Because they actually this, but I want to just use this real quickly because this is what I'm talking about. Scott is just regurgitating what Trump says. Lawfare. Yes, lawfare. Russian hoax. Yes, Russian hoax. They just regurgitate the message that Trump puts out there as a demagogue. So when Obama was in office, he could get away with murder because the media ran cover for him. But with the Trump media now, they don't just cover up his faults. They say, no, none of this exists. These are all media lies. Trump is really good. Well, whatever. It's every single thing. Trump is protected by his echo chamber, which now is likely to grow because of the censoring of other media outlets.
Well, so I was going to say that in comparing the two, I would prefer the bull in the china shop. If I'm out in the water surfing, I would rather see the great white shark that's stalking me than not, because when I see them, I have the capacity to do something about it. As terrifying and horrible as it is, as opposed to being ambushed and having to think at the last second what to do, I prefer the guy I can see. So we're lucky in a sense that Trump doesn't know the Constitution, that he's a blustering blowhard, that he's vain and superficial, because all of those qualities make him non-introspective. And
Yes.
the less introspective he is, the more chance I have to see the punch coming. Right? I can see. He's telegraphing what he's going to do, and now that enables people who are liberty-minded to set up lawsuits and start pushing back in a way that I think is really, really relevant and will have long-term consequences down the road, as no pushback would have, right? If he wins these lawsuits, or if he's able to convince his administration, as we're going to find out here later, or maybe it was in the earlier article, that the Homeland Security wants to prosecute people, but maybe it was CNN. Maybe they want to prosecute CNN. I forget which article it was.
Yeah.
So the more we see these people doing what they're doing instead of being behind the scenes in smoke-filled rooms, I think the better for us.
Had you asked me this question 10 years ago, I think I would have given the answer you just gave. The problem is everybody's just a Cassandra, right? Because it's not listened to. There are prominent conservatives who will say this is BS. Jonah Goldberg, George Will, to name just two. And what happens? MAGA turns against them.
Yeah, so, MAGA is a strong movement right now. I think it's changed the face of the Republican Party.
Right. So
2016 was correct.
So yes, normally under normal conditions, for instance, I would rather have the blatant racist, so I know it's a racist, than a subversive racist. But if somebody's out there being an open racist and nobody cares, then you have a real problem. And that seems to be what happens with Trump. Any pushback he gets, his people don't listen. Now, his people might only be, say, 35, 40% of the country. I don't know exactly what they were, but a 40% immovable block is a hell of a lot. When you've got 40% of the country, or 40% of voters, or whatever it is, who will not move, who will accept anything he says, that's a serious, serious problem.
I think
so. Right now, I don't know. I don't know which is worse, but I do know this. Right now, the problem that we have on our hands is a president who is not restrained by truth, Constitution, or his own base.
Yeah, that's definitely troubling. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about populism later on in the show if we have time to get to that article, because I've noticed this immovable group. I have one or two friends who are in that category. Nothing I say about Trump can convince them that he's not the person to put your trust and faith in. And part of that is from that the populist ability to rankle, whatever cause his side has, to get them agitated about it and feel like he's the savior for that cause. And the cultural leftism has damaged a lot of people on the right. I know we laugh at it and we say, oh, what possible harm could it do for you? Well, it's done a lot of harm. It's done a lot of harm materially to people. It's done a lot of harm psychologically to people, and they want revenge. And they think their guy is fighting for them. I mean, that's Trump's main appeal to these folks, is the fact that I think they consider him to be a cultural warrior. And of course, the only thing they have to lean on is what their version of traditional American culture is. And they think it's a war of civilizations. In some respects, they are right about that. Douglas Murray has written about it, and I agree with him. There's a confluence of forces that are anti-Western, that are powerful, and that have captured our academia and have captured social media outlets. But that does not justify taking over nations and using political power to decide.
What you just said about the civilizational battle, I don't even know if what I just said was a word. Civilizational.
I think it's whatever. I think it is.
But my point is this: what I'm going to say, and it's why I interrupted, because I think it's important to capture this. I think it's ultimately a war on reason. right? It's reason is out the window on all sides. To probably put out something that might be a kind of obscure point, but Race Jacobson just, I believe, referred to Trump as an M2 type dictator. I've heard people say that. I actually believe if you were going to talk about Trump with your bull in the China shop analogy, he's actually D, not misintegration, but disintegration is actually where I would put him. But if you see,
he has more in common with the left epistemologically.
Right. And here's the interesting thing to me, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this, but for decades, the left, the postmodernists have told us there's no truth. Everything's subjective. Words are just, completely arbitrary. They're nominal. They don't really mean anything. Concepts, they aren't real. These are just social constructions. We're not really referring to anything. When you've had this assault on knowledge for so long, assault on truth for so long, can they really be surprised when you got a guy who comes along to whom truth doesn't matter, when it's totally irrelevant? So I think the true battle in that regard is reason versus anti-reason. And that's one of the reasons I think those who think siding with Trump as sort of a weapon to be used against the left is such a mistake. It's epistemological. That's the problem.
I agree with you. When I say civilization, I'm not using it in the terms that a Douglas Murray does necessarily, or a conservative. For me, civilization is a rational civilization versus an irrational one. And there's certainly the forces of irrationality have laid down for us the foundations of a culture that is entirely emotional. So it's not surprising to me in the sense that my couple of friends who fall on the Trumpster side of things are unconvincible, because they're just responding to the emotion, the desire for revenge, the gotchas that this guy seems to feed them every once in a while.
What are your thoughts on this right here, Mark?
Weapon. He's more like a bodyguard. What is that? What is that in reference to?
He's referring to Trump. I said people want to use him as a weapon against the left. Scott says no, he's a bodyguard.
He's not a bodyguard. He's not a bodyguard because he's irrational, and he's not really dealing with threats in the way that a Republican, and I mean that in the small R term, actually would. Your bodyguard would actually be using the constitutional restraints to tamp down government, to hold down political power, not exercise greater political power. That person is actually, you can't say he's guarding your body. He's actually destroying it and parasitizing it. So I would call that something else, man. Certainly not guarding your safety and freedom. Because remember, everything Trump does today is a precedent for tomorrow. So all of these lawsuits that he's bringing against various news organizations, and the leverage that he's using with respect to the FCC, which was its original intent, by the way, when Franklin Roosevelt instituted the FCC, it was to deal with political opponents to the New Deal. And that's precisely how it's being used now, to leverage media outlets to give Trump what he wants. That will be a precedent for tomorrow. So everything you think is a gotcha today, if it's an extension of political power, will be used against you when the other tribe is in office. Never forget that. That's not a bodyguard, my friend. That's short-term thinking, not long-term thinking. So
anti-conceptual is what it is.
Anti-conceptual.
Yes.
Which should be the title of Trump's biography. So the Epoch Times printed something recently. It says Pentagon assesses Iran nuclear program set back 1 to 2 years. That is pathetic. What say you?
That's actually was my thinking. Is that it was pathetic. I'm very hesitant to speak on specifics like this because I really don't know what a strike should be accomplished or how long it should put it off for. What I do know is that putting it off for 2 years, which is actually the high end. That's that's the spin take on it. Mm-hmm. Now, when you think of CNN reporting, it postponed it by 4 months. They say 2 years. So I'd say it's probably a year, which is better than nothing. But now, so what? Are you just going to have to bomb them again in a year? Is this going to be the periodic thing where we just bomb them to prevent nuclear stuff, when in the meantime, maybe they're doing other nefarious stuff, trying to hack, whatever they could be doing. And now they're not even going to have any oversight. They're turning their back on the UN, or what's it, the International Atomic, the IAE, right? That's what it is, Atomic Energy Organization. So I think it's bad. And this, again, it was part of the reason I didn't want to see America to get involved. I don't trust Trump to execute this thing. I think that right now, if you look long term, we're probably worse off than we were beforehand, because now we've explicitly made Iran a target of attack. We didn't do so effectively, which is probably going to build confidence in them. And it seems that Trump is really obsessed with being the peace guy. In which case, when you make that your fundamental goal, right, and that supersedes all else, you're going to have a tendency to accept that when it's not actually what you're getting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positives that come out of this attack, but I agree with Yaron that this attack should have gone on for 2 more weeks. That Trump's obsession with, I think, getting the Nobel Peace Prize derailed the possibility of really taking Iran out as a nuclear power, and that's what I think was Israel's actual intention. If you say, on the campaign trail, as Trump did multiple times, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, you're saying forever. They will never have a nuclear weapon, not in 4 months or 1 to 2 years. They will never have one. And if you keep doing these piecemeal attacks, just whenever they get up to a threshold point, you start attacking them again, you're in for a perennial war, just like we've been in for the last 24 years, perennial warfare, because the objectives are not clearly defined, the enemy is not clearly defined, and we have no will to actually carry the war to its completion, which is a complete vanquishing of the enemy. So they should have completely destroyed these facilities and continued bombing until the facilities were utterly destroyed, and Iran's capacity for a nuclear program was utterly destroyed. Now, what's funny I found in this article was Pete Hegseth denied something that I heard immediately following the attack, which was that several trucks were seen leaving these facilities, and that they think fissile material was in these trucks. So they think that the uranium was transported away from this area. So when you think about CNN saying they're 4 months away from a nuclear bomb, that's because that's already enriched uranium at 60%. And it's not a big step to go to the 90% they need for weapons grade uranium. So really, if they have the facilities just to upgrade that uranium to what they need, they are not far away from putting fissile material on some kind of weapon, or selling that to some terrorist organization who will use it on an American or European city. So this is, again, the elites not understanding the full context of the engagements that they're involved in, and not having the will to complete the assignment, which is to prevent Iran from ever having a nuclear weapon. Yes, they were already trying their best. I agree, they were, but they were constantly being sabotaged by Israel. Thank God, they had Mossad inside, who were able to get the blueprints to these facilities, so we knew exactly what the facilities were composed of, where they were, where the air vents were. It's some of the most masterful intelligence work on the planet that was not fully exploited by the United States. If we're going to help Israel defeat these guys, we have to defeat them.
Okay. First, I want to address 2 things. First, the thing that you just said, that in regard to Alan Thomas's comment here, he says Bibi has been claiming that for decades, that Iran is right on the cusp of a nuclear weapon. Of course, when you say yes, but it's because of that Iran hasn't gotten a nuclear weapon, it's an unfalsifiable claim. There's no way to know the truth of it. Because you're saying that the very fact that he's been calling it out is what stopped it. So there's no way for you and me to know that he was actually correct. No, I'm talking about Bibi Netanyahu. There's no way. It's Alan's comment he made, and then you commented on it, whether knowingly or not. But Bibi's claim since the 90s that Iran was on the cusp of a nuclear weapon. I'm not saying you're wrong that Israel prevented it. I'm just saying it's an unknowable. There's no way for me or you to assess whether or not Iran was on the cusp of it, because it never came about. Now, as for Jim's comment, Jim, of course, the time estimates are not irrelevant, Jim, not in relation to this, because if you have somebody that's been crying wolf for 40 years or whatever it would be now, 35 years or 30 plus years, it is relevant. So it's also relevant, though, Mark's point. I'm just saying that it's an unknowable thing for us. Epistemologically, we simply can't know. And as for epistemological things we cannot know, Jim's claim that Iran was already trying their best is something he cannot know. I cannot know. Logically, it tells me. Now, I can't prove this. I'm just going to give you what I think is a reasonable take on this. That Iran knew that if they were ever to give a large strike against us, we were going to attack them, right? We're going to hit them hard. It's certainly within the realm of possibility that they didn't go at us because we weren't attacking them. They did not want to get attacked, but now we have attacked them. And so now they have a greater incentive to hit us. But not only that, because we didn't absolutely hit them with everything we had, or at least, a good amount of what we had, they may be learning the wrong lesson altogether.
I disagree wholeheartedly with you on this. I think they look, the reason they warned the American bases that they threw missiles at after we attacked them was because they knew that if they attacked us and killed Americans, that they would be over.
Mark, you just contradicted what you said 2 minutes ago.
No, I didn't. Hold on.
You
Not
did.
only that, I think the enemies of America, and there are enemies of America, I think China, Russia, and Iran and North Korea are enemies of America. They've seen what Israel has done in 12 days, even though the mission wasn't completed, and what America did in 6 strikes. And they saw that as seriously incapacitating a power that was known to be a world belligerent power, and much of the world was afraid of, dismantled within 12 days. To me, that is a troubling thing for the enemy to know. Whether or not America finished the job, whether or not Israel was allowed to finish the job, it sent a message to, I think, the relevant parties that they have to be very careful with respect to us, because our weapons are simply better than theirs. And I agree with James. All we have to know is that they are trying, because they have no right to try.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, you agreed with Jim when he said Iran was already trying their best, but then you just said that they held back because they didn't want to.
No. He said trying their best to get a nuclear weapon. I said they held back with respect.
No. I was talking. That's not what we were talking about. I was talking about to get us.
Yeah.
To attack us.
They won't. They won't try their best to get us because.
Okay. So you didn't actually agree with James.
No,
but
I was the context for me with respect to they were trying their best was that they were trying their best to get nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. That's not what I was agreeing with.
Okay, so we're talking about two different things.
Yes.
All right.
So, but as far as, well, they held back and warned the base. Yeah, that was the immediate. That was what took place right then. But now time's going to go by where we're not attacking them, and they can plan and they can think, what can we do in the future? That could very well, and I don't know, and neither do you. I'm just saying what the possibilities are and the complexities of when you do stuff like this. You do not know what they're going to do. What they do know is that we are not likely to really, really take them out, so that they can continue this sort of activity, maybe ramp it up. Maybe they'll, push like all criminals do, push the boundaries, push.
They already have.
Yeah. Well, okay. So then you do think they've been doing their best.
They already have, but no, I think they.
Okay. So what I'm saying to you, Mark, is it's likely to increase.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that Trump's attack did nothing but weaken us. It has not actually strengthened the United States of America.
I disagree with you, and I disagree with you.
So you think that
I think two opposing things can in the real world can be simultaneously correct, believe it or not. I believe that the enemy can see, or the various enemies can see, how disturbingly powerful our militaries are, and I'm talking about the respective militaries of the United States and Israel, while at the same time try to undermine them and use whatever weapons they can, including our own ethics, against us. so that we are demoralized and don't fight as hard as we could, which is their only weapon against us, by the way. Their only true weapon against us is using our ethics in a way that demoralizes us so that we don't have the will to fight. And so they can do that sociopathic thing where they trade off being at once the victimizer and the victim, so that, you know, people who doubt their ethics as we do, you know, vacillate in our own policy as opposed to going straight ahead regardless of what they're saying. And that seems to be their primary weapon. To me, that's not strength.
Okay. So Scott asked, how is Iran stronger now? Even Russian support wavered. Yeah. If you think in terms of 3 weeks, sure. As the report that we just read, they've been weakened because their nuclear program has been set back. They also now don't have inspectors going in. They also are now likely to continue this, which is going to put us in the same position in a year from now that we're in now, where we feel.
Well, this is what I said. This is what I said earlier. I said this is why we're in perpetual wars. I said,
well, okay, so then Mark, this is driving me crazy.
No, if they get a certain capacity, we fight them, we reduce their capacity, we think that's a virtue, then move on.
Yeah.
But they are.
Do you think that this limited strike was helpful?
They know something now that they didn't know before.
Mark, do you think that this limited strike that we engaged in, and everything that both preceded it and followed it, including Trump praising Iran, God bless Iran.
Oh no,
and saying,
that's not.
But that's all part of the equation. You can't just isolate one strike and say, yeah. You have to take the whole thing into consideration.
I can isolate the strike and say yes, but in relation to Trump's style of diplomacy, I think is wrong across the board.
But
His
that's part of it.
Style of approaching dictators as if he's a used car salesman and that these people have moral value that they deserve to be negotiated with is all wrong. I agree with you. Okay,
yeah,
that's wrong.
But that's when I'm thinking about this issue. And let me get Jim's comment off the screen. But I can't find him now. I can't find Jim to get him off. When I'm thinking of these situations, I'm not just thinking of one point isolated. When you think about war, when you think about any policy, I'm taking Frederick Bastiat's lesson into consideration, the seen and the unseen.
Yeah.
Yes, the immediate strike, the immediate military strike showed what we can do. True. The aftermath and what Iran said and done since then, including putting a fatwa out on our president that's being, for all we know, ignored.
Yeah,
that's part of the equation.
Right.
You can't just eliminate that and say strike good. You have to. This is one of the reasons I opposed it, because I don't trust Trump to carry this type of stuff out.
Your opposition lies in the fact that Trump will not have the heart to carry it through to its conclusion. If he had the heart to carry it through to its conclusion,
it would be a different argument. I don't know how I don't know, because it would be a completely different set of circumstances. My opposition is based on the fact that I do not trust intelligence agencies to tell us the truth, because they have a history of misrepresenting things or outright lying. So I don't trust them. I also am doubtful about Iran's ability to strike us with a nuke. I'm also doubtful about that they would actually use it. And because in Shia Islam, they have prohibitions on what they can actually do in war. For instance, when against Iraq, even when they were hit with chemical weapons, they didn't respond in kind because it violated their religion. Now that was 40 years ago. And what do you mean in what respect? I don't know the exact chapter and verse. I just know that it's against Shia law to wage war in that way. Doesn't mean they wouldn't violate it. I mean, I don't trust them. They're scumbags. I'm just saying there's a lot of doubts in my mind about why we should be hitting them. Also, the fact that our Congress hasn't waged war on them. But a very large factor in my decision making is what government actually does, as opposed to what I think they should do. And what government actually does is screws up virtually everything it does. This president in particular has shown himself to be unpredictable, whimsical, incompetent, and flat out immoral. And none of what's followed this strike has dissuaded me from my position on him. So why would I support it?
Oh, I agree with you with respect to the way he follows through on foreign policy and the way he frames foreign policy. It's an utter disaster. Um, Alan Thomas says something here that I think is strange. But Alan says China now also has confirmed quantum tech that can detect stealth aircraft. This sort of seems paradoxical to me because the only way to me that these folks could get that kind of technology is by stealing it, I think. And then I don't even think they could innovate within it, given the structure of a centralized authority like that makes it impossible to really forge ahead scientifically and to innovate scientifically. So it's like, do you believe this, that they have, that it's confirmed that they have quantum technology that can detect stealth bombers?
I haven't got the slightest idea.
Yeah, I'm skeptical about all this, but there was something that came up, but I didn't see what it was. I didn't see that tweet or that.
Okay, hold on one second. We've got Alan Thomas as a question, and we have something that I wanted to reply to with Scott. Subby has a very disturbing quote of me here that I don't like. We now have a name, Pelaval Lebo. So the three of us are now.
No, I think it should be James.
Okay.
James Pellegrino.
Okay. So Scott says that I go against everything Trump would do. Okay. So I was not opposed to Trump's non-interventionism that he promoted, that especially last time until he violated what he claimed he was going to do and hit Syria. I was very much in favor of that. I'm very much in favor of Trump's deregulation. I'm also very much in favor of Trump's tax cuts. So Scott, sorry to tell you, but that's out the window. I also supported his pardons of drug offenders. So I don't know what else to say to you. I'm critical of all these politicians who are prone to violate our rights. My take on government has been the same long before Trump came into office, that I don't trust them. I think they're incompetent and dishonest. So there you go. That's all I'm going to say on Scott. Alan Thomas says he wants his question on North Korea answered, but I don't know that.
Yeah, you might have to rephrase it again, Alan.
Yeah, what is your question about?
Didn't North Korea just launch one of their first class cruisers or battleships and it sank, and they had to spend a bunch of hard-earned North Korean money pulling it up from the depths of the ocean and then refitting it so that it could actually sail?
I don't know. I read, as you know, a ton of articles in the morning, so I don't know what I've missed, which I could have missed something vital, but I don't know.
So the next article, if you want to talk about it before Alan Thomas's question on North Korea comes up, Reason also published an article that said J.D. Vance says immigrants will bankrupt the federal government. The opposite is true. Now, this is something we hear in the conservative media all the time, how immigrants are a source of violent crime. Violent crime is rising, and of course, we find that it's falling. Murder rates are lower than they've been in years and years. Immigrants, there's the notion that the right likes to put out that immigrants, they come here and they immediately get put on the dole and they become a drain on the taxpayer. They're parasitic, and because of that, that's what's going to bankrupt America. Now, apparently this isn't so. Apparently the opposite is true. Of course, more people means more tax revenue, means more production because there's more availability for jobs. Sometimes that puts a lower pressure on wages, to lower wages, which actually works in favor to us. It raises our standard of living because that is a cost, right? It's a factor of production. So it's something that makes our life more expensive or less expensive depending on its price. So by almost every metric that you would measure financial solvency, more immigration helps rather than less immigration, right? So apparently Vance used this ploy to try to get the right, to gin up the right to pass this bill, this big beautiful bill in Congress, in the Senate. Now, so what do you think of this? Do you agree that more immigration is preferable to less immigration?
I mean, the empirical data supports it. that more immigration is better for the economy. It might they might outcompete low-level jobs in the short term, but in long term, it's very, very good for the economy. I do like the way that the author of this article seemed to really zero in, hit the nail on the head, and that's that the real threat to our finances is Congress.
Yes,
Right?
I loved that. I thought that was a
To
great
me,
formulation.
that was just that hit it right, and because that's the truth. Who causes more damage? Congress, who last I knew was on the cusp of passing the giant disastrous bill, or the immigrant who wants to come here, work, and rent someplace somewhere, right? Who's the threat
Exactly.
to the country? Who's the threat to
Exactly.
our finances?
It's funny they talk about a class war. The communists talk about class war, Michael, and there sort of is a class war. The political class against the rest of us. And that's why the political class has to be restrained by constitutions, folks. And the founders knew that. And that's something we want to go back to while advancing forward with a progressive agenda as well.
What I want to do, Mark, on Monday, because we've decided we're not going to do a show tomorrow because it's the holiday. I'm going to get you the essay on unicorn governance by Michael Munger. That, and for a good time, I wanted to get to a good time because we always talk about bad things. There's also a great positive article by Jeffrey Tucker. I'm going to get them both to you, and we can discuss them the next time they're on, that we're on.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to see that.
What happened with Alan's question? He said he has to get an answer.
I keep looking for it, but I don't see it. This is a very interesting thing I wanted to get to before the capitalist thought of the day. It comes from the Daily Economy, the persistence of benefit cliffs, a behavioral look at policy problem. Now, I know people who are on benefits, and so I've seen this firsthand, where I have a friend who's in his 80s, and he's on SSI, and he's been on it since his 50s. He got terribly sick. He never saved any money. He was sort of a spendthrift, and so he got himself into a pickle that he couldn't get out of. And now he's been permanently on these programs, which, according to this article, 70% of the people who go on these programs end up staying with them because of this thing called a benefit cliff, right. which means if you start making money, they reduce your benefits accordingly. Now, if you want a program to be a springboard to actually being a productive and independent human being, this is certainly not the way to do it. And he's told me that he can only have so much in his bank account before they start cutting benefits. Now, that is a discouragement to savings, which, of course, as you and I know, and as any capitalist out there knows, should be the source of production. I mean, our savings is the source of production, right, and investment. And to discourage that for the short-term, moment-to-moment kind of economics that our welfare state incentivizes is a very dangerous thing. So, what would be your solution to this cliffs benefit, where the more you work, the more hours you work, the more your benefits get cut, but it's not a net gain. It actually becomes an economic loss for you. So you're incentivized to then not work as much so that the benefits are not reduced. So there's no harm to your personal income. How would do you think do you have anything immediately that comes to mind, any process?
No, the central argument in the article was that economists, when they do these things, their assessments, they focus on what they call rational choice theory. And that's that everybody is rationally maximizing their own benefits. But the author of the article points out there's psychological effects as well, where somebody doesn't look at it like, okay, if I get off this program, so I may be losing $75, but I'm gaining $100, so it's a $25 gain. What they actually see, because human beings, and it's been shown in study after study after study, focus on the negative far more than on the positive. So what they see is the $75 loss. They don't see the $25 gain in there, which I thought was vital. I disagree with it because he was trying to come up, it seemed, with smarter solutions, but to maintain these programs. Exactly. I actually don't think that the goal should be I think it's very counterproductive to have a situation where people are going to be screwed by getting off the programs, because that disincentivizes it. But I think ultimately we should be focused on the individual rights piece, that some people don't have a right to other people's time, effort, and money. and then, we could also explain how down the road that'll actually even benefit the people who are, currently on the, say, free medical care system, because if you privatize everything, get the government out of the way, the cost of healthcare actually goes down. So it would then be affordable. So you kind of have to argue both positions, focus on the individual rights piece, which I think is paramount, but also explain to the people that are coming off of these programs that they're going to be better off. There'll be charities helping out, prices will go down, there'll be far more options.
Explanations work are pretty hard when it comes down to tangible realities for folks, though, because those institutions would need that infrastructure would need time to find itself, to work.
Alan's so pissed at you right now. Like, Alan's
I'm gonna answer him right now.
He's throwing things. Alan's on the point of throwing things around the house. He might even throw his goose. They have a goose.
We have to. I know they do, and he's gnarly. His name is Marcel, and I was gonna fight him and decided not to. I'm actually frightened of the thing.
They hiss. I didn't know that. Diana told me we went to a pond.
They have claws on their web feed. It's just
it's very creepy.
About them is creepy.
I didn't know. We went to a duck pond, and Diana said, and I said, I'll go over there and mess with the geese. And she says, they hiss at you if you go over. So sure enough, I go over and
that's scary. That's the
creep.
Speaking of attacks, though, Alan wants to know why we don't attack North Korea and we attack Iran. I 100% agree. Well, that ship sailed in 1953, my friend. We could have finished North Korea and communist China in one fell swoop, but the political will was not there. MacArthur got sacked as a result of wanting to take the fight to China. When China pushed us all the way back to the edge of the peninsula, he had stretched the Chinese army to fatigue state. They were completely overstretched. He wanted to starve them out of existence and bomb the interior. That would have been the end. We would have taken North Korea. China, we wouldn't have China as a cold warrior against us in the present moment. That ship sailed in 1953. We shouldn't have allowed them to get nuclear weapons and firing missiles over the Yellow Sea at the Japan. And constantly doing hostile military maneuvers is a provocation, I think, that we should never have allowed to happen. But now that genie is out of the bottle, my friend, and there's not a lot we can do about it.
I have a quick question, Mark, for you about that before we get to the capitalist thought of the day, which you're doing today. So you just laid out a scenario. The other day, somebody laid out a scenario and said we should have taken out the Soviet Union at the end of World War II. You just said that we should have taken out China, right? We know what happened because we didn't do that, right? We know the results. What we don't know and is not knowable, but nonetheless, when you're before doing it, you have to take into consideration what might be the effects. Do you not think that it's possible that things could have been far worse had we taken out both the USSR and then China? Because we don't know what would have come about.
Well, we do. Chiang Kai-shek was on Taiwan, and we put the 7th Fleet in the Strait there to keep Chiang Kai-shek from invading China. It would have been.
But he wasn't. It wasn't like he was some liberal.
Right. He wasn't. He was a nationalist, and that's true. That's true. I don't think he would have been worse than Mao, and I think he would have been more amenable to market changes than the current administration is. But we now know Xi Jinping is almost out of power. Apparently, there's been some disruptions over there that look like he may be off the throne, and they want to replace him with somebody a lot more "quote unquote" pragmatic, who's much more friendly to market changes. And who knows if our recent forays in Iran have been some of the causes of this pushback within the Xi administration. I'm going to say yes because it puts my perspective in a good light. So the American. Folks, so we talk
That's
about
how you get a Funko doll, folks. That's how you get one.
We talk about capitalism here, and capitalism is a system that restrains force, folks. It bans it in all interpersonal exchanges, and it restrains the government to only the use of retaliatory force. Now, that won't produce a paradise in the sense that the communists look at paradise where everybody gets everything they want, but it leaves you with the potential to get everything that you want, the potential to realize your own potential. is there in a free society, and it's not there in a top-down economy. It's not there when politics and elitists are robbing you of your moral agency, of your right to your own life and property. You simply cannot realize your potential as fully under those circumstances as you can under a capitalist system. Now, there's no guarantees, and there aren't even guarantees in the centralized system that attempts to create a utopia here on Earth. But there is a guarantee that you will be worse off if you give your moral agency over to others, if you leave your health care in the hands of others to decide for you, if you leave any moral decision in the hands of others, you will probably be leaving yourself worse off. It's not a platonic utopia, but a what? But a springboard for flourishing. I love that formulation. I'm going to steal it, Race. I'm going to leave with that. So, folks, we will be back here on Monday, same bat time, same bat place, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, I want you to have a very good 4th of July. Please be grateful for the fact that you grew up in the United States of America. It's still the greatest place on earth, despite what the pundits on both sides want to tell you. We are so fortunate to be here and celebrate the fact that some giants a couple of hundred years ago gave us the right, helped us to realize that we have a right to live for our own sake. And while you're doing that, please check your premises, and we'll see you back here on Monday. Peace.